What's the reason to start a business? My background was in carpentry, so I was a furniture maker and had done a lot of field work, and enough's enough, no more having anybody else take advantage of our skill sets. We're going to do it ourselves, and we're going to deliver it to the world in a really cohesive and packaged way. And when we put out to folks that we would be shifting gears and starting a business, we had a lot of people say to us, finally, things are going to happen. It's just a matter of time, right?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Designing Tomorrow. I'm your host, Mary Beth, and in today's episode, we have Shawn and Christina Taylor of Dacotah Studio. They founded their Los Angeles-based firm in 2019 and have since been featured in Architectural Digest, House Beautiful, the Los Angeles Times, and more. And in today's episode, we'll get into why they started Dacotah Studio, how they took their experience managing big teams to create process from day one, and how they're focused on building their design build firm with intention. There's so much to hear, so let's dig in. So I think really for those out there who don't know about you, and also, quite frankly, many of the people we've interviewed in the show so far have been designers. So you guys are our first design build firm to be on the show, which I'm really excited about. So I just kind of want to dive into your background. Neither of you started in this direct industry, right? And so what's the story behind Dacotah Studios?
Well, it's kind of interesting. We did actually have a lot of years to run up before we started Dacotah Studio, which was 5 years ago now. My background was in carpentry, so I was a furniture maker and had done a lot of field work and owned and ran a couple shops. So I had really understood the residential side of the work. Tina actually came from the commercial side of the business.
Yeah, so I was working for fashion brands in charge of creative services, so designing all of the retail stores, window displays, visual merchandising. So pretty adjacent to where we are now, obviously more commercial focused.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but so we did have a run-up of maybe about 12, 13 years prior to starting Dacotah Studio, at least with an acknowledgement and understanding of the industry and what was happening, but jumping into client servicing business instead of working for a corporation. And I was working independently with architects and interior designers for a lot of years. But it was very new to us. Some background in it, leading up to it. But as two business owners now, starting and running our business, and it was new from day one. It was right around COVID when this all started too. So it's a lot going on.
What was the big leap? Like, what made you decide, okay, we know that you do know this field. Sorry, I kind of misspoke there. You knew this field. You were kind of in it. You just hadn't done it in this way, and you hadn't done it together. So what was like the moment of, hey, let's go into business together as a husband and wife team and see where this goes?
Yeah, I tell this story quite often. I think, Tina and I always talk about it and reminisce about it. But, the pandemic was upon us. We just had our daughter, Autumn, who's now 5 years old. She came into our lives. The pandemic came into our lives at the same time.
Yeah.
Tina was going to be going back right into the fold a couple days before the big shutdown in March. And she had just come back from maternity leave. And we had, 3 months of bliss, early stages with a child you look back now and think like, well, it was so romantic. It was so blissful. And it was, but we had these 3 months that we thought, we don't want to give this up, right? We didn't want to give this up. And we kind of were forced to. Tina was going back to her job. I was continuing to run my business, and we knew that we were going to be kind of two ships passing in the night from time to time. And we weren't really sold on that idea, It forced our hand with the pandemic, 2 days of you going back to your corporate job, and then they sent her home. They said, hey,
grab your computer, grab all your stuff. You're going to be working from home.
Yeah. And at that time, she had a pretty large team. I think you were in the 20s or 30s with different staff on her team. Everybody got stripped, everybody was furloughed. It's such a strange time to think back on now, but you were going through a lot of that too, right? Of having to let people know that their jobs were not secure, and dwindling team of people to be able to exercise, a pretty large, business. And Tina would come home prior to the pandemic and just always kind of emphasize like, all I'm doing is managing people now. I'm not getting to do the things I love to do, which are the merchandising and the designing and the, and sure, it comes along with the security and everything else, but you lose the passion. You lose the thing that you originally wanted to do.
Yeah.
Long story short, we said, enough's enough, no more having anybody else take advantage of our skill sets. We're going to do it ourselves, and we're going to deliver it to the world in a really cohesive and packaged way, and know what it is that we also experienced within our industry, and also being two homeowners going through the process of remodeling. What were those things that we really wanted to make sure that we could guide people on. So it's a little funny story too. I remember right before Tina had said, I don't want to do this anymore, we were getting rolling racks of clothes from the brand that she was working with.
It was funny
our
because
home.
my team was a creative service department, and there was one other team on the company that had creatives working for them, which was e-com. They also had graphic designers. I also had graphic designers. They furloughed the VP of e-com. So they're like, oh, well, Tina, you can take over e-com. You have creatives and a creative background. Go for it. So like Shawn mentioned, we just started getting rolling racks and rolling racks of product. And
we were taking,
this isn't what I'm passionate about. Like,
no.
I'm a designer. I'm not an e-com merchandiser or photographer
But that's the shift in that business at that time too. At retail was like, just survive. What do you have to do to survive? Autumn was strapped on to Tina's chest. I had a camera and a tripod taking photos of all the new product that was going to be launched on the website. And I remember looking at her, and it was maybe like day 2. So this wasn't even like deep into it. And I said to her, do you want to do this anymore? And she said, no, I don't. I said, quit, just quit. And we're gonna make a leap of faith. We had known when we met each other 13 years ago that we were in, parallel universes, and at some point in time we'd want to partner and work with each other.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of good came from the pandemic for us. And then we also were able to buy an entire year of starting up our business, but being with our daughter. You look back on it now and think I would never give any of it up. It was just the best move that we made. And our hands were forced, but it also was one of those things that unless our hands were forced, I don't think we would have moved into it. We were both doing things independently and comfortably. So it was a risk. We took the leap, and we, again, would never go back. Yeah.
I love that. It's actually, I have a very similar story, or Thomas and I. So Thomas, husband, co-founder of Materio, we quit our jobs early 2020, like January. We're like, we're going all in on this. Found out I was having our daughter February 1st, and then we dive into research, and we're like, later we'll go to Italy and spend the month there and work. And then all of a sudden it's like the world is shut down. We're having a kid, and now we're building a business, officially. So, I can relate to just being, at least for me, being a new mom in that environment and just being new parents, was kind of insane. I think on that note, I can just imagine you're at your house, you're getting rolling racks of clothes, and all of a sudden you also have this new thing in your life that you're in love with and taking care of. I just want to know, I know you're okay, just quit, but what actually unfolded, and how did you, at what point from that day until, okay, Dacotah Studio exists and we're going to try to get our first project? What did you do? Because y'all are so savvy with marketing. You're so, well presented. There had to be some thought there. Tell us about that.
Appreciate that. You want to take this?
Yeah. I mean, there was, of course, thought. We used all of that downtime that COVID offered all of us to brainstorm and develop the business and our brand identity and how we were going to run this and what our ethos was going to be. So we definitely used all that time with me still working, and Shawn was still working. Also, he was working for a big furniture manufacturer here in LA and running their whole operation. So he was still going into the factory. I was still working during the day with Autumn at home with me. So at night and those weekends, we were just brainstorming and figuring out how we were going to do this, how we were going to get our first clients. Luckily, we had a network around us. We have some great friends who are real estate agents who have been a really great resource for referrals. We had a network of other just acquaintances that were going through remodeling. As I think everybody knows in this industry, COVID was a big uptick in our industry of people renovating their homes and wanting to invest in their homes. So there was a lot of opportunity for us at the beginning, which was great. And using that network and just using all that downtime to really develop who we were.
Yeah, what was really interesting too, Mary, is that when we put out to folks that we would be shifting gears and starting a business, we had a lot of people say to us, finally, like it's
Mm-hmm.
almost like they anticipated us
Yeah.
to do that.
Yeah.
And we were just taking our sweet time to get there. But immediately we reached out to a few folks, just kind of let them know. And they were like, wow, what serendipitous timing. We are wanting to remodel. Do you want to remodel our house? And we're like, yeah. I mean, our first project, big project, was in Malibu.
Mm-hmm.
It was on the water. So it's just a natural market and network of folks that we've grown, and friends and in relationship with that have trusted us from day one, which is fantastic. And then we did, right after that, we were into another whole home remodel through a realtor friend of ours that had sold the home and brought us in early and said, there's nobody else you guys want to work with. So we've had a lot of people that have really hung their flags, in Dacotah Studio. And we felt that love, and we continue to as we, journey ahead. But we're really, really lucky to also, again, have that background and experience in the industry, which I think then led to people's trust and confidence in us when we were going to them saying that we're going to be doing this next phase and starting Dacotah Studio. So that was it. It happened pretty quickly. I think our first project, as we went in, started the business, we, got our S Corp set up the LLC, and started kind of financially figuring out, different credit lines and things to open up at the bank, and really finding the business to be situated. Within about 2.5 months is when we first got our first opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
It was a whirlwind. Nonetheless, looking back on it now, you think like, how did you do it? And you just did it. You jump in and make it happen.
It's hard to name those things.
This was what we were meant to do too.
Mm-hmm.
Like the first project being as successful as it was, and then that second project being as successful as it was,
Mm-hmm.
it was really like, oh, okay. And it gave us the confidence then to really continue and drive it forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think, so y'all being the first design build firm on here, I think sometimes there's like confusion or just like different definitions of what design build is. I'm curious if you can explain that in your own words and sort of why you went that direction. I mean, I know you have the background in carpentry, obviously design, but really positioning Dacotah Studio as a design build firm versus just a design or.
Yeah, it's funny because there's quite a lot of conversation around this in the marketplace, especially now with, customers and clients engaging us for the first time, and wanting to have that education has been something that good. Obviously, there's a lot of verbiage behind it, right? It kind of gets into the weeds. But traditionally, what we saw, and I saw a lot when working with interior designers and architects and doing building with them, is that there was a lot of discord, right? There were a lot of opportunities to point fingers and not take responsibility and accountability with multiple stages of the project. So I think with a traditional design bid build process, hopefully the whole team is on board and everybody understands their roles and responsibilities. And as we know, there's always things that bleed from one process to the next. And if you have somebody that's a little bit stuck in their ways, maybe they don't have time, or they bit off too much of a project or whatever it is, some of those important handoffs are glitchy, right? They don't make sense, and there's more charges that come along with additional services that the client or the customer never really knew. They were just going off the trust of the partners that they hired. I think the management of each one of those people also plays in a huge factor. I don't think homeowners that are getting into remodeling think about these things. They think, well, this is the way we're supposed to do it. I'm going to hire the architect. They're going to work some structural engineering for us. We're going to work then, with the interior designer, and then ultimately have a contractor to bid it all. We found that oftentimes looking at that model, it drove costs astronomically up because each person didn't fully understand the true identity of the project and the scope of work that needed to be executed on. All that being said, we thought that the design build model, which incorporates everything under one roof, allows for us to have a singular focus and communication with the client. So we're able to really, early stage come in and communicate, what and how we're going to be doing what we're doing, lay the foundation and the groundwork, knowing that we have a solidified team of folks that we work with day in and day out that allow us to, again, just create consistency, also create visibility and clear lines of communication. So if we are early stage, pulling permits, doing an as-built, getting it to a proposed set of documents, all that's happening here at Dacotah Studio, even the next phase in the design. And we found that the overlapping actually helped the process churn a little bit better, right? The handoff wasn't so shaky. We weren't having to wait for somebody else to be able to kind of open the email and start the work and so forth. So we've always thought and continue to think that the design build process allows for, early understanding also of costing. So preliminary costing is really important, especially as designers. We look to things and always make them beautiful, but sometimes they don't fit within the overall investment of the client. So it's nice to be able to have an early stage understanding, with costs, contracting costs, and everything else involved, owner supplied materials and so forth, where we can find ways to value engineer. The accountability aspect to it all is the thing that drove us mostly towards the design build, knowing that we just wanted to have as much control of the process as possible and lean on the folks that we wanted to bring into that process instead of relying on outside sources. Clients would bring in this partner or that partner, and we would oftentimes in the early phases get stuck. So in the beginning of Dacotah Studio, I think we were like anybody else starting a business saying, we're just going to roll with it. Like, okay, cool. We'll come in as the designers and we'll work with an architect. We had some pretty bad experiences, mostly around communication, So the first year of business went by and we thought to ourselves, wait a second, this process doesn't really work well for us. So we're going to lean more heavily now into design build. So it took us a little time, but I think ultimately, those things are the most important about the design build process for us. Do you have anything to share?
No, I think also, like Shawn mentioned, it was so important for us to control all aspects of the project for the client, and having an architect come in a more traditional format first, and then a designer coming in and working off of their architecturals. It's just hard for you to really put your full design input in that when you're working off of someone else's initial design. So it's worked out better for us to just have a clean canvas and work the whole thing from start to finish.
That makes sense. I think too, as I could see where clients these days, they're more and more savvy each day. Younger people are looking to build homes. Construction is very expensive. So when you look at, let me hire an interior designer separately and a builder separately and an architect separately, and they all have the overhead and the fees. And then there is the biggest hurdle, which is communication. So the architect convinced me this was good. Now you're convincing me this is not good. Now the builder is saying something else about it. I do think that design build creates a really nice cohesion if you can keep that everything, all of it in-house. So I'm sure that, you'll find that a lot with your clients. One thing I'm curious about is that you both came from, previous larger companies where you're working with a lot of people. Like Christina, you're managing lots of people. Shawn, we didn't get into how many people you're managing, but you're working with a lot of people. And now you start this thing on your own. And I keep hearing the word, like, we wanted to be able to control the process. We wanted to be able to kind of control the client experience. It sounds, I know you'll advertise that a lot, like we're very process driven, very much about the client experience. I want to know, like, are there any specific elements of working on big teams or cultural things that happen that you think, well, let's not do that where, in our own business, because we've experienced that. And I think I say this and ask this really because culture is really hard at companies, right? Like even in small teams and I mean culture, even working with your trades, maybe not people you're full-time employing, but like there is relationships in this business. And so I'm just curious if y'all have any great takes on that others might appreciate hearing.
Maybe this is like stereotypical, but as a mother and a woman, there's like a softness naturally that comes from me. I'm also horoscopally, if that's even a word, a Cancer. So I'm like naturally just like more of a maternal person. So even when I managed a large team, we treated our team very much as a family. And like, even though I was the VP of the department, I consider myself equal with all of them. And I think that's really important now with us with Dacotah Studio. So even that tradesman coming in, I want to treat him with the same kind of respect that someone's going to treat me on a job site. And I think that's just us as humans and as the Taylor family. That's how we live and how we raise our daughter, with social justice being first, and human dignity and decency is really important. And it just floods over into Dacotah Studio and who we are as business owners and people working with clients and tradesmen.
I think the culture, is you're exactly right, Mary. It's extremely important, especially as you're trying to scale and grow. I think because we saw what scale looks like and what major growth looks like, we've seen a little bit of both of the sides, right? Tina had mentioned I was at a furniture manufacturer here in Vernon, which is in LA, and we had 78 people on payroll and on the floor, right? It was a pretty large factory, about 36,000 square foot. And we were building for the likes of Kelly Wearstler. We were building for, the Archers, and we were doing everything for the Nobus and, Ace Hotel, everything, right? We were doing a lot of large scale manufacturing. And the culture wasn't so great there, like folks weren't so happy, but they were there to do a job. And, that's what they did. When I was there, I did try to kind of bring in some culture, have pizzas on Fridays and let the team know in the morning as I entered the floor in the factory. I'd walk around the floor and I would say hello to everybody, good morning, how are you, what's going on? Everybody's got a story, right? So the owner at that time didn't do that. So that was a shift that we were consciously trying to make. And like Tina mentioned, at Dacotah Studio, just our own ethos really does play into who, we are. I don't think we've had to be really canned or produced. It's very much coming from our heart and coming from our minds about how we, establish the growth of the business. We just hired a junior designer, and we've gone through kind of a 45-day period with her, and it's been really fun to get her feedback as well. What are the things that you're enjoying about working here at Dacotah Studio, and providing feedback for her. And I think at any given time, I don't think we're going to get larger than maybe 5 people, in the studio itself. But we want to keep it pretty small because, again, we've seen that scale. We've seen what can happen, good and bad when things scale. We like to stay personable. Mm-hmm. We like to stay joined in our thinking. We don't like to have no work-life balance, I think with big teams, you kind of miss out on that opportunity to shut down on the weekends or, shut things down at 5:00 at the end of the day when we're going to pick up our daughter. So we've been there. We've had the dual phones before. We've done all that stuff. It doesn't meet any sort of desire anymore. It feels like you've obtained the goal and have seen that level of what you thought was success. And now it's bringing it back down to reality and starting with something and keeping it fully balanced. Maybe we didn't even answer your question.
Well, it's silly. It's a silly question in a way because I'm asking how are you intentional about culture? And you guys are like, oh, this is just us. We're just great people. So which it should be. It's easy to want to, impress your clients potentially with the size of your company or the work that you've done. Or it's easy to, want to make really splashy marketing and you want that for some reasons. But then also, I guess what I'm saying is I'm just wondering how you balance that. It sounds like you've brought on someone to the team, which I was curious about. I was going to ask, what's your team structure? Is that y'all's first hire?
It's our first hire.
First hire. So you've made it almost 5 years without hiring someone, which to me is yes, I think that's great because it just means that you've been thoughtful about the work that you're doing. You've also been efficient with the work that you're doing. You have a process. You wouldn't be where you are and just hiring your first person, I think, if you weren't thoughtful about it. So my real question, and we should just nerd out on process, is where we should go next. It's just I mentioned it before. I think, pride of process, I'm pretty sure is your tagline. It's always on your email signature when we chat. You're process driven, relationship driven. Talk to us about, you have a new person. Okay. But what's your process? What's your structure like? And specifically, everybody needs to know how you think about process, because I can tell that there's this little beautiful thread between both of you, and you have you're in the same. We just want to hear.
Yeah, I think process for us, just starting with the idea of what process is, I think is so important. And when we met each other, we kind of understood that we both had similar passions for the idea of what process was. I was in carpentry, so very, very process driven from the moment that you acquire the material to milling it, to gluing it up, to finishing it, right? It's all very, very systematic. There's creativity, obviously, in the process of learning how to operate the machinery and tools and, doing some original design concepting. But process for us really does consist of, and look, I also take a step back in a former life. I had been in the financial industry, and I always learned that the person that really dials in their process is a true professional, right? If you can do something with consistency and you find good rhythm and you find good success, it's not always about, making a whole new process. It's finding one that works and being able to deliver on it time and time again. That was the true mark of what I learned professionalism was all about. We can plug material here because it's a huge part of our success and the growth that we've had. But y'all really built a platform for us, for our creative thinking and our visual understanding of process come to life.
Yeah.
So everything from Gantt charts in the organization around how we're actually manipulating daily, weekly, monthly schedules for visibility for clients, process on the design side early on. We're scanning homes now, which is a fantastic offering from an as-built perspective. We found that, working again consistently with the same partners and putting together a process of, having our draftsmen do the submittals to the city for us for, observations, remarks, and revisions back from the city and so forth. So what we've done is set up a process that delivers to our team, but doesn't hinder us from doing the things that we want to do. I think Tina and I have learned now that with the two of us, we can handle quite a lot, but we're not just two. We're a team of roughly around 7 to 8 that are other true professionals that are working around us, right? They're not employed by us, but they've got a lot of work and responsibilities in and around Dacotah Studio. So our process is always being manipulated a little bit, changed a little bit because of the updates that you guys are doing on the platform to help us, fold those in. But it was something early on, I think we both understood that we needed process. Tina managed really high level budgets, and that's all process oriented. Hey, we have a milestone that needs to be met. These dollars are going to be delivered. You're moving to your next milestone. So it was almost just ingrained in us from our past life and experience. And what we did is really edited it down to make it work for us at Dacotah Studio. And we're still, I don't think we'll ever, because we're such process oriented, I don't think we'll ever stop with developing more tools inside of our process to make it better. We find things that every project, we aim high, we miss the mark. That's okay. We come back, we miss the mark, we think internally, and from an external perspective, people, oh, it's great, it's fantastic. But we're always looking to add additional value through making more of these kind of stop points and gaps, in and along, because it's a journey. The process of building a home, remodeling a home is a journey. Mm-hmm. We tell that to folks quite often that haven't been doing it before, haven't done it before.
I just know myself as being a very type A person. So process is a big part of my life in general as a person and our family life. Our daughter probably, it drives her crazy sometimes, but it is what it is. So yeah, like Shawn said, like managing such a huge CapEx budget for a publicly traded company, there has to be process behind that. There's a lot of eyeballs on it. So you just have to be organized, is what I've learned to be successful. And bringing that over to Dacotah Studio, we knew was the only way that we'd be able to succeed is to stay organized and create a process for us to follow and just kind of rinse and repeat.
Yeah. And, we were doing things the best we could before we met you guys. We were doing things in spreadsheets and we were trying to, tack on as much information as possible for client visibility. And it was just, it worked, but it was just a jumbled mess, right? Mm-hmm. There was no real way for us to track what was going on. It was multiple different tools trying to develop. And it's like, wait a second, we know our process, but we don't have the tool to be able to visualize for the customer, for the client, what that looks like. And I think we learned early on in our first couple projects, that people were desiring the visibility. They were desiring clear lines of communication. And for us, that was great. But fielding all of that and trying to implement it was complicated, right? It almost hindered us, I think, in the early stages, because it would be, this is over there and that's over here and this is over here. And I'm not the best when it comes to programming. Tina's very good at that stuff. But for me, I'm like, man, what is going on? It's so complicated. It doesn't need to be this way. All that being said, I think, living and kind of dying by process here at Dacotah Studio is definitely, in our ethos. I think creatively also, both of us are two creatives that like cleanliness. We don't like disorganization. We like to see our systems, shine. I think as you start talking about business and kind of, looking at standard operating procedures, I geek out on that stuff. I just think that it's so important to be able to not only establish good workflow, but also potentially develop to a larger scale in the future, knowing that you have things that you've done yourself for the last 3, 4, 5 years that you can hire for, that you can hand off and say, with confidence, this is the way we do this, and this is the way we want you to do that. I think is really important. And without a process, it would really just be throwing something against the wall. Hopefully it sticks. And it's just not what we've seen, at least at a high level with businesses that we've worked for and been around that have found success. It was always very much, have good accounting, have good bookkeeping, make sure that you understand where all the dollars are going. And with clients need to know that too. We observe all these client interactions as real investment opportunities, right? That's what we talk to clients about. It's not what's your budget, and no, it's what kind of dollars are you investing in this? These are big dollars, $500,000, remodel up to $1 million plus. People want to know what's going on. So I think that process, again, for us, letting people know like, hey, we're going to shepherd you through here, from where the dollars are being spent. If you didn't have process, you wouldn't have that level of visibility, and we wouldn't be getting the clients and the interactions that we were having with folks. So process just continues to be key behind the scenes, as well as out to the world.
And it's been so helpful onboarding our new junior designer too. Us having a process that's been now tested for 5 years, her coming on, it's been so seamless bringing her on board and her learning our process, because it's just tested and true for us. And having Materio has been such a huge asset for her, and she's learned it so quickly, and it's just been great for us staying organized with someone new coming on.
Yeah, it has. I think the other thing too is that, everybody has different business structure, different desires. We asked ourselves that early on when we started this business. And we had a little bit of a burnout situation, right? I mean, working around big teams and knowing what comes along with that, we asked ourselves early on, I asked Tina and she reciprocated, asked me and said, what do you want from this? Where do we want to be going with this? It's kind of that big question, like, what's your why? Why are you going to start Dacotah Studio? And what came down for us at the time was we wanted more time with our family. We wanted more time with Autumn. We wanted to spend time with each other. We wanted to enjoy the beautiful city we live in, which is LA. Yeah. I mean, there's so much to be had here. And we thought, what's the reason to start a business unless you're really going to be fulfilling your desires and what you're really wanting to do? So I think early on, we knew that we had to be hyper organized, and the process was going to be part of our 9 to 5 because if we wanted to turn it off, we needed to make sure things got done with efficiency and clarity.
Today's episode is brought to you by Materio. Materio is an all-in-one visual project management system for interior designers and design build firms. If you are struggling with managing project details and invoicing across 4 or 5 systems, then you need to check this out. You can learn more by going to www.materio.co and signing up for a free trial. I just love it all. I feel like I'm just like, you guys are great every time you say something. I think that one thing a lot of teams struggle with and small business owners struggle with is systems and process, and like putting that on paper, and not just like, it's easy to sometimes put it on paper, but then to follow through with it and to train new team members and to keep team members accountable to that process. So I'm wondering, you kind of came out the gate with this. I love that you are also, just side note here, that you're saying, well, if we wanted to spend time with our family, which we do, and we want to spend time with each other in our city, we had to do that. Like you were smart enough to know that you had to do that in order to shut it off. I just love that. So how do you, great example, Tina was just saying, you've hired on this new person. It's made it super easy. How do you actually, and I mean like literally tactically, like, do you store it in a Google Drive? Do you have it in a Asana? Like where does it live? Where do these things live? How do you actually get your new teammate to be, or your new employee to be on board with it and to follow these practices? Maybe this is the first time, so you're learning, but like.
Yeah, we're learning. Absolutely. I think you go ahead, speak to this one.
Well, everything is stored in Materio. So 70% of our business is run through Materio. Everything else is on a Google Drive. So whatever we can't put on Materio is on a Google Drive, and able to just share the Google Drive with our new employee and adding her to Materio. Being able to use that dashboard with tasks for our new employee, assigning her things through Materio, having her clock in and out through Materio.
Big one.
It's huge. Like, she has that accountability. We know how much time she's spending on each project doing which deliverable. We know she knows when a task is due, and we know when she's completing it. I mean, that's been just a huge asset for us. And then all those other assets that she needs access to, just being on the Google Drive, she knows, okay, if it's not a Material, I can access it from the project folder on the Google Drive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we have kind of a little bit of a backup on Google Drive and documents that are kind of constantly, living there that we know that she needs to access, or even for us, being able to send off something if it can't go through Material, it's just easier to go over there and click and send off. We also use the platform called Figma, and Figma is a place that we've done a lot of our creative development for our brand specifically. So we have all of our brand assets, colorways, font types, all the messaging that we need. And again, access to those things are really important. Hey, we're going to be putting Dacotah Studio logo on a plan set. Where do I find that? How do I get that? So we've put together at least hey, we've got 3 distinct places where you can obtain the information that you need for the task that you're working on. And like Tina mentioned, I think the nice part about having this dashboard, as well as tasks oriented in a process for each project, we can really be pointing to the next thing that needs to be done. And again, since we've done it so many times and we continue to develop it further, we know what's coming next. So we can almost stay ahead of the tasks that we know they're going to roll out here and hand off to the junior designer in the studio. So we're still working on it, though. I'd truly love to be able to have, if we do hire on, 1 or 2 other folks in the near, future, I'd love to be able to have some, standard operating procedures similar to what you do, Mary, which is, recording the process. We're so visual as people. And for somebody to be able to sit down and really, digest that information either on their own time and or in the studio can really kind of accelerate things and allow people to get up to speed pretty quickly instead of having to sit shoulder to shoulder and walk through it all. So I think we're still figuring it out. I think with our new hire, her name's Elena. She is an extremely talented, designer and very, very quick at naturally picking things up. So I think hiring right is probably first and foremost, right? And knowing that this first hire and for us is probably the biggest leap forward with Dacotah Studio, it was really important that we understood who was going to be coming on board. But we're still working on it. Again, super thankful and really, really grateful for what she does and how quickly she picks up. But we know that's not going to be the case with everybody. So, I think we need to get just more delved into, what those handoffs would look like and, how to organize those structures for somebody that might come in and start doing more project management. Which again, Material has all the opportunities to be able to kind of, tweak the dials and find out how to hand those things off. But
I think a few things there. So one is kind of stepping back a little bit. How did you know, 5 years in almost, you're ready to hire someone? Why a junior designer? Like what, you could have hired a project manager, you could have hired a drafts person. Like, what was the reason for this person, and how did y'all come to the decision of okay, this is our first hire and this is who we need most?
We knew about a year ago as we were going through projects, at least I'll speak to this, and we were seeing where a lot of the new projects coming on, there's a lot of early stage designing, a lot of early stage, conceptual thinking. And I found myself more and more in the field. I found myself more and more engaged with the contracting side and the project management side and so forth. And Tina was here at the studio and I knew right away, as much as she likes to be by herself, that you need to kind of have another, person there just to bounce ideas, to come up with new creative thinking. And I think both of us realized it too. She's like, I am loaded down with work and it would never be the person to admit it. But when I heard her say that, I was like, my partner's in need. Like we had to figure something out here. And, bringing those 2 forces together allows you now to, free yourself up and do the things that you really want to be doing. Not to say that we just hand everything off that you don't want to do to the junior designer, but it folds in a whole new aspect, at least for us in the studio, and the rhythms that we're creating here and kind of going through the systems, with her.
Yeah. And we had tested a project manager early in the year because that was initially what we thought we needed to bring on first into the company. And he's definitely someone we would hire on probably next. But we were realizing as we were testing the role, this probably isn't the next position we need for Dacotah Studio. And like Shawn mentioned, it really was design, because if we had myself and another designer, we would just be able to take on probably another project or wrap up design quicker to then get it into construction. So it was good that we tested that and just realized, okay, this is a great position for the future, but we probably don't need to invest in this position right now.
Yeah.
When it came to hiring the junior designer, did y'all have any special hiring tactics or practices that others might find useful? Like, did you issue any tests?
Yeah, actually, we
Yeah, we
did.
did.
You know?
Yeah, people probably would hate this, but we didn't have a position open anywhere. She actually reached out to us, and we were on vacation, and her resume came over and the loveliest email with it. And we looked at her portfolio and we're like, oh my gosh. I mean, she like nailed it. Her design aesthetic was so in line with ours. Her delivery, she just seemed lovely over the email. And so we reached out, not even realizing we were in the market for this role, even though in the back of our heads we knew this would be something. And so we reached out and we scheduled her an interview here at the studio. Or no, we did a Google Meet interview first, and then we had her come to the studio, and we had sent her a project that was early on that we had just got, that we had just done like an inspiration mood board for, and we sent her that, and we asked her to put together a mood board for a kitchen for the space, and then have that ready for her to come to the studio with and to pull materials to align with the mood board that she created. So we gave her some time in the studio to go through all our material library and pull together samples and then present the mood board to us. And we were blown away with, one, how quickly she was able to do it, how eager she was, and how aligned it was with what we would have put forth to the customer.
Yeah, it was really, it was, again, like Tina mentioned, we knew that we wanted to hire somebody. We had put up a few, posts on social. We've put up a few, and I think you reshared. So thank you so much in helping us kind of search for that person. But we truly believe that everything comes in the right time. It's, I guess, just the way we live. We definitely put a lot out into the universe and into the ethos of, here's where we want to be going. Here's what we think this position might look like. I call them developing seats in the business. What is the next seat that we're going to have, and where do we want to be going? And lo and behold, we get somebody reaching out that just met all those expectations. So very fortunate and lucky in that way, to not really have to go too far down too many interviews. But Tina interviewed quite a lot of folks. I did as well, working in my past life. And, it's a pretty natural process, but I think the big one for us was to have her come and do a physical material pull, to really see, how does it translate? I know you put together great designs, but can you physically bring it into the world? And what does that look like? And what's your understanding of being in the field, getting site measurements, looking at terminations in the field, not just in CAD or not just in, any modeling that you're doing. And she really understood it. She knew it. And so we were very fortunate, but we did have a little bit of a kind of a two-step process. Yeah. With her, Google, Meet, and then in person, which was really important.
Yeah.
I love that. I love pulling materials and actually, it's easy to put something together digitally. I shouldn't say easy. It's easier to put things together digitally, but then to feel confident and comfortable to even come into your space, I think also would just speak highly of that person, that they're willing to do that and did it really well. Okay. Also you mentioned earlier, you said, okay, I would love to do video recording. Like,
Yes.
I'm sharing my screen and I'm doing SOPs like us.
Yes.
Absolutely game changing for anybody listening. I've told this to a bunch of designers that I've talked to one-on-one, and I should just say it here so that anybody who listens to this can hear it. I actually got this from a business coach, Dan Martell. It's called the camcorder method. You can read his book. It's called Buy Back Your Time. It's a great book for business owners. But I think that's where I originally learned the way that we kind of make videos at Materia, which is you share your screen. And I mean, I use it for tutorials and other things, but like you share your screen and you walk through the step. And the coolest part about this is now you could go into, for example, Materia. You could share your screen and go, this is how we build a board in Materia. This is how Dacotah Studio wants it to be done. Here's where we, put these things. And then you can actually take the transcript from Loom, because I use a program called Loom. You can take that transcript, throw it into ChatGPT, and tell it to write you an SOP, and it will do it for you. And then you have the video. You put the video link at the top. Watch this video, and the trick is to record yourself doing it 3 times. And by the 3rd time, you've probably hit every edge case that you should have enough. And then even better is if you get your junior designer or whoever you're hiring to write the SOPs for you. So,
Yes.
hey, I had this initial process. Can you record yourself doing it the next 3 times you do it? Not only can you comment on the Loom and give them feedback, then they can write they can solidify the process. So I highly recommend Loom. It's my favorite product in the world. And the book is great also for, business owners.
I think I've read a few of his or listened to a few of his interactions with other folks. And I think that's where my kind of SOP conversation comes from as well. So
he's infiltrated he was originally a software founder, and so I think that he's starting to infiltrate the business world. And I love that because I think for small businesses and maybe people who, never worked in a corporate structure and never had to deal with big teams, but run their own businesses, I think a lot of these practices are really useful. So I'm all about it. Okay, so you've mentioned Material a lot. You mentioned Figma. Are there any other tools or softwares that y'all use that you just are hey, everybody, you should absolutely look into this?
Other than the basics like SketchUp and AutoCAD?
No, yeah. I mean, that's kind of I think Material is probably the biggest one that we use on a daily basis. There's so many features that we just, developing them with you guys, having the opportunity to be able to say, hey, we're looking for this thing, and you guys incorporate it so quickly. It keeps us invested, right, in Material instead of trying to find. I think if you have, 15 different software programs you're using, you probably are doing that because you're just trying to fulfill the need. And the need is being met time and time again with us in Material. So we don't find ourselves really seeking or actively looking for anything else. We've found our systems that work.
Yeah. But that's literally all we use is AutoCAD, 3D Max, SketchUp, Material, Figma, and Google Drive.
That's it.
I didn't pay for this, guys.
You did not. Absolutely not. No.
I didn't pay for this.
And also, Mary, we were thinking about it the other day. I don't know how many years we've been with you guys now. I think maybe
4, maybe
coming up on. You have to look back, but I think it's been.
I would have to look back. It's been a while.
Yeah.
I think you're one of the early customers that maybe still exist for sure. So thank you. No, I think that I'd have to look back. I feel like if you started in 2019, we kind of quit in 2020, had sort of a test case customer using the platform. They sent I remember sending the first client proposal or client bid in June of 2020. And we were like, is it going to work? I don't know. And then 2021, the next year was, I feel like really the year we started to early 2021 was really getting out there and getting other real people in the world to use it. So I don't know. I'd have to look back.
I think it was 2021.
I think it was 2021 because we recently went back to a project pre-Material, which just seems so archaic to look back at that Google sheet.
Pretty funny.
Oh my gosh, it's painful.
But you were trying to do the same things. It's funny. I watched one of our customers had a series where they, went through the whole project and it was pre-Material and you watch and he's talking to the process and you're like, that's exactly what you're trying. We studied what you guys were doing. So that's why it's you were doing things and we just made it a lot easier. So
and safe too. Even one of those early projects, we would share the Google Sheet with clients so that they had access to the budget tracker and the specs and everything. And there was one client, do you remember this? And the client deleted a bunch of lines from the Google Sheet.
Sometimes those things, just rattle you so much. You're like, oh my God, I'm just going to just redo it instead of having to try and figure out how to fish it back out. And they didn't understand what was going on. They didn't realize that they did it. They were like, oh my gosh. So safe, right? Safe on Material. Yeah.
Well, and I think that's a very good segue to literally my next question, which is we just love a good horror story or challenge. So it sounds like that was one. But can you tell us about a time where, you guys were this might just break us? I don't know, what's the most overwhelming thing that you've been through? And it could have been relational. It could have been a project, but we've all had those moments.
Listen, I think on every project, there's something that comes about, right? That challenges us. break us. I don't think we've ever experienced anything.
It was like close to breaking us.
Yeah, I think we've been pretty steady in knowing that we literally sit next to each other side by side in the studio, and if a problem would or obviously has arisen, both have really creative ways of thinking about how to solve, right? I think we're both natural problem solvers.
Mhm.
So when we got into this, we knew, especially with our past histories, things are going to happen. It's just a matter of time, right? And
Yeah.
being quick to respond, being proactive in how you approach it by putting together a process in an organized way about how to create a solution, that created for us, we knew the best we could do. So if anything has and continues to come along, we talk about it. It's immediate communication, and a solution is put forth. So it never feels like we don't have an answer. Maybe it's not the right answer in the moment. Maybe it's the answer of we don't have an answer, but we're going to get back to you and we're working on it. I think that's something that we as a team in Dacotah Studio do really well, is don't allow things to really shake us so much to the point where we're feeling like we're thrown off. We try and stay really stable in our thinking. We try not to overanalyze everything, which is difficult because, we're thinkers. But, ultimately, at the end of the day, I don't think there's anything that's almost broke us. One thing is some slowdowns with business, right? I think when the
Yeah.
market shifts, when we've had historic lows in interest rates in the 5 years that we've been in business, and we've had now increased rates. We've had an election cycle that's over, and hopefully continues to kind of allow people to free up their thinking or not. I think that there's market conditions would probably be something I think that we've experienced, at least in the last year, that really set us in our thinking of, okay, we know this is going to happen. We don't have control of this. And what do we do in those downtimes? In this downtime in the last 8 months, the progress of work, although we had work that was happening, the new work was really slowing down. And it really made us look internal, like what's going on? I mean, we have all of these great outputs. We have these great systems. We have all these great clients. We have these testimonials. We have all this stuff. But for some reason, none of it's actually coming to fruition. Like there's nobody reaching out. Instead of sitting back, we developed a magazine. We put together all of our knowledge and understanding of what people were requesting of us and thinking about asking in the early phases. And we went to task, right? I mean, we knew that we were slowing down and said, well, we have an understanding of what we want to do, and we set it forth and did it. And by the time that happened, kind of kept our minds away from being so fragile in the moment. And we had something to proactively produce, and we produced it, and we felt accomplished. And now it's a major part of the marketing and advertising material that we put out. I think when things do put our back against the wall, we're pretty diligent about that character in that moment. I think we've been there before. I've been there multiple times in my businesses. I think you've been there multiple times in your career. It's going through it. I think it's going through it multiple times. And if you're a new business owner, if there are new business owners listening here, it's practice, right? You're never going to get it perfect, but it's the practice of doing the thing that you know is important to you, and also learning to say no, right? Even maybe to yourself, or saying yes to things that maybe feel like they're, scary to move into or push into. But it's the practice of it all. And I think we've had a good deal of practice in knowing that, we've had, excuse my language, stuff just hit the fan, shit hit the fan, right? At other companies we've been at. And you saw how people responded and reacted, and nobody reacts well to, knee jerk. It never something that gets you in a positive direction.
That's good. We don't want you to be broken. I just didn't know if there was, you guys are so even keeled and stable and like level headed. I feel like I should have known, but it makes me think. The other day, my daughter, she's 4, and she sometimes just asks me questions that I'm like, I like couldn't imagine that coming out of a 4-year-old's mouth. And she's like, Mom, we're moving back to New York, and I'm going to go to a new school. I'm excited, but like, I'm kind of nervous, And I'm like, that's okay. Like, everybody's nervous. Like, actually, one of the coolest things in life is that you get to do things you're nervous about. I was like, how do I frame this? You get to do things you're nervous about. And then when you do it, you realize like, you did it and it
Yeah.
wasn't that bad. And then the next time you might feel nervous about something else and you do it again. And like, it becomes okay, it becomes normal. And I just thought like, I was like, ooh, wow, nailed that as a mom. Hopefully that landed and like she'll get it because I feel like, it's probably taken me through my adult life to go, Mary Beth, you don't have to react to like things like it happens or like you are nervous about something, just do it and you're going to feel so much better afterwards when you've like treated that moment the way that you felt like it should be treated versus like reacting or freaking out. I think that's beautiful that y'all took that time to go, okay, well, how can we use this time effectively? How can we build something that's going to help us? And I was actually going to ask about the magazine because I saw that you self-published a magazine. It was very like much of a guide and like what the process is. And I just didn't know like what was the reason behind that. Now I kind of know. Maybe you can elaborate on that a little bit more though.
From a kind of a marketing and advertising perspective, I'm always interested to see what's in the market. What people are doing, how people are getting their brand in front of people. Right. Social is a great way to do it. I think that's fantastic. I think having a beautifully adorned website with photography and all the things is great. There's something that, at least in the circles of influence that we're around, that people really like things that are tactile. They like to, kind of go back into time. I know it sounds really weird, but we're so digitally forward
Oh,
now. To have
yeah.
something to hold on to look at, to experience. And we knew that typical customer of ours is a couple. And to share something digitally versus having something in hand and being able to sit down with your partner and look at it together, having it leave, itself out on a coffee table or a countertop where, let's say I, is the partner in the relationship, have some free time and I'm flipping through it, and then my partner comes along and they flip through it. It's just a way, I think, to pull people together instead of, hey, here's this digital version, here's this digital version. We were even thinking about potentially putting something in the back, like a note section or like just a way for people to jot down maybe scope of work they were thinking about with their project or anything to kind of help set the tone, whether or not they worked with us or anybody else, just to be informed about what early phases of the project they need to bring to the table, right? Because we found again that the education piece here at Dacotah Studio, the visibility and the communication are the things that really are the driving force behind our success. This magazine just laid out the process visually and then also had something tactilely for people to experience and enjoy. And it's been a real hit. I think, we take it in, hand it off to folks, and it's got a big impact value. And then when people get into the content and really start reading it, they're like, wow, you're giving away a lot of information. It's like, well, it's not
Yeah.
giving it away. It's just putting it in a place where, that you need to be educated and that this is an opportunity for this to do that. That was the impetus of it, though. And I had gotten it actually, kind of an idea of it. My folks live down south in Orange County, and my mom handed me something that she had gotten in the mail from a local developer that was down there. It was similar, but wasn't
Not very
branded as
different, yeah.
beautifully, and nothing that you would want to leave out. But I saw what he was doing, and I mirrored that. And no shame in that either. It's, you see something that you're compelled and drawn to, and then I put our own spin, our own twist, our own brand, and messaging behind it. So you never know. I mean, you're inspired and by so many things that are in and around your world. I can't say it's an original idea, but we made it our own. So yeah.
I mean, I can imagine that, you've left that with a potential client. And even if they're looking at other firms, they're going to see that and they're going to appreciate that. And it's going to speak so highly of you all that, you took the time to educate them. And again, even if they take it elsewhere, they're probably not because they're going to be like, wow, this is impressive. You should add like a little like sketch, like where they can sketch and draw things on the back or like really make them go old school and like cut out magazine clippings and like paste it in and bring it back to you.
We also
Volume 2 will give you a little shout out.
Yeah, we
Inspired
also
by Mary Beth.
we also have a 5-year-old daughter, and
Understood.
stickers are really big, right? So maybe it's
Oh
something to
yeah.
do with any way to be able to collage together some
Yeah.
ideas. Yeah, we're going to be working on a volume 2 in the new year. So just trying to fill out
Awesome.
what that's going to be.
I love that. Well, let me know if you need any ideas. I, li-
Thank
I,
you.
I really wanted to do magazine design. That was actually like
Oh,
what I set off to New York to be a magazine designer. didn't work out. It just didn't pay, but I would not have survived, but it's something I'm very passionate about. So if you need help, let me know.
Cool.
Thank you very much.
Okay. We've spent an hour together, but I have sort of one last question. I have a lot more, but I think for today, we're going to get with this last one, which is, I recall you mentioning at some point that y'all had hired on a PR team or a PR person to sort of help you with that. I was wondering if, when did you decide to do that? Are you still doing that? And just kind of talk about like why that may be useful for other teams out there.
You want to speak to this?
Yeah, so we had hired on a PR team that was referred to us by some friends that are also in the industry, and they spoke really highly of them. And we had just photographed 2 projects, and we were so happy with the photos and the projects. And so we knew we needed some help getting some press on those projects that we thought that they could obtain. And so we hired on, their name is Rodriguez PR, and we brought them on for 4 months, I would say. Yeah, 4 months. And then, like Shawn mentioned previously, we saw a big slowdown in our market here in LA. And so we stopped using them at the time. We still are in contact with them for projects here and there, but they were wonderful. They helped us with press for projects. They helped us with social media and just like an overall confidence boost too. They were wonderful.
Yeah. I think we were marketing in a few different ways and had known that maybe the next kind of rung up was to hire a PR agency, because they had the access to, like Tina mentioned, publications and more access to editors and, just folks. That's what they do. Yeah. So, hiring them was a bit of a search, but when we did find them and we felt confident with them, we pulled the trigger. And it's hard to say, right? I think, Mary Beth, you because there's so many different avenues of how people are driven, to making their decision. You don't necessarily, and we ask this all the time when we have discovery calls with new, potential clients, where did you find us? It's so hard to really know, how much do you pin as kind of a return on investment, right, for those dollars that we spent. Needless to say, we got beautiful coverage in, Arc Digest and Beautiful Home and Home Decor and a couple others, and Living, etc. And that was based on, sure, our work and our knowledge of what it is that we were producing, but really from them being able to, extend out what we were doing into that larger circle. So quintessential, I think, in way of, having these opportunities, especially as projects finish up and we know that they're going to be noteworthy, we can reach back out to them and say, hey, look, we're really excited about this. Can you shop this for us? Can you take a look at who would be interested in showing maybe a before and after, or a, whatever it is. It's always good to have a PR team at your call.
So it sounds like it did positively impact like business. At least you have those accolades now that you can have on your site. Maybe it's not something that as a small business you need full time, it sounds like, but it's like something that is nice to have a relationship, bring it in as needed when you have a really big project you want to showcase. Okay. Well, I have literally probably 15 more questions, but I only have you for an hour. So I think we're going to call it a day, but this has been incredible. Thank you so much for spending time with me today, for getting it all set up and, working on schedules and all of that to make it happen. So I am very grateful for y'all.
We're grateful for you,
and
too.
We're very grateful for you too. This is a two-way street here.
This episode is brought to you by Materio. Materio is your all-in-one project management system that allows you to have scope of work, project management, timelines, invoices, procurement, and more all in one place. So if you're looking for a way to consolidate your systems and move faster on your projects, then you must check this out. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of Designing Tomorrow. This podcast is brought to you by Materio. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to subscribe, like, and leave us a comment below about what you thought.